Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Karen Cameron, CEO of the Ontario Public Transit Association, and it's my pleasure today to welcome you to the latest and in fact, the last Opta Live webinar of our series. We've been running these Opta Live webinars since May of this year in place of our annual conference, the Ontario Transportation Expo. These webinars are only possible with the generous sponsorship of our business members. And so today we'd like to thank FlowBird, one of our newest members, for their sponsorship. I'm going to stop quickly here just to mute everyone. I'm going to ask our speaker, Thomas Oliva, to unmute himself there. And then Thomas, when you are unmuted, I'd like to turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining today. It's my pleasure to do a little workshop with you about open payments. So we'll get started right away since we only have one hour. In the promotion for this workshop, what we proposed is to brief you on the possibility of open payments, given that in the last few years, Visa, MasterCard, and Interac standards have been implemented that are specific to transit. Open payments has been around for quite some time. Some of the earlier systems were implemented more than 10 years ago. But for a variety of reasons, that did not take off. But in the last few years, because of the changes in standards, differences in technology, it is now becoming a popular mode of fare payment around the world. So what we're going to cover today is just a quick review of what are the objectives of this workshop. What are open payments? What are some of the key functions and features? How you go about calculating fares? What impact that has on your fare policy and how you actually implement the systems. If you have any questions, just type them into the chat. And where appropriate, we'll try and respond to them during the presentation or at the end. There's also going to be some time for questions, answering questions and discussion. So what are we going to cover today? Well, first, there are different ways of implementing fare policy using open payments. So I'm going to present about the difference between known fare and open payment technologies. I'm going to talk about how open payments can be added to existing fare payment systems, and then what are the impacts on fare policy. Currently in Canada, a number of open payment systems are either fully implemented or in pilot stage. So you have Presto, of course, is piloting open payments in the Greater Toronto region. Ottawa, OC Transpo is piloting open payments on their light rail system for now. Vancouver already has open payments. Edmonton is implementing open payments. And our customer, Société Transport Laval in Montreal, that system is up and running and accepting open payments. And Laval was actually one of the earlier adopters of open payments with an earlier generation a few years ago. So what is open payment? Well, essentially, it's being able to use a contactless credit or debit card as both a payment method and also as your fare credential or your travel ticket. So it's contactless technology. In Canada, most credit cards and debit cards are already contactless. But one of the big growth areas is using mobile wallets such as Google Pay and Apple Pay in a contactless mode to pay. And you're seeing this at coffee shops, convenience stores. People are using their mobile wallets more and more simply because of the convenience, and most people now have a mobile phone in their pocket. So how does it actually work? Well, when compared to a traditional fare payment system, for example, using a ticket vending machine, you first need to go to the ticket vending machine, buy your fare product, and then once you get the fare product, then you can use it to ride, whether that's on a bus or a train. It doesn't really matter. You could also be buying it through other retail channels, retail stores, ticket offices, etc. But always there's that step first where you have to buy the fare product before you can use it. With open payment, there's nothing to do. You just simply go to a validator, you tap, and you ride. And the system calculates the fare and charges your credit card the appropriate amount. So one of the things that open payment does is it removes some of the friction in a customer's journey, in that they don't have to think about getting a ticket in advance or having the appropriate cash to pay at a fare box. They just use the mobile phone or contactless card they already have in their pocket, and they can ride. As I said during my introduction, Visa, MasterCard, and Interac now have open payments standards that are specific to transit. And it takes into account some of the specific operating conditions that transit poses to contactless bank card payments. So the first is that the standards support near real-time or offline payment processing. So where you have a fixed connection to the internet or to a network, let's say at a train station, gates, and so on, it's easier to do online processing. However, in most circumstances, when it comes to buses and other modes of paratransit and so on, while mobile communications is now ubiquitous and highly reliable, it's still not necessarily available 100% of the time. There may be areas of a region where the connectivity is not very good. But the standards do support that type of situation, in that a customer can still tap their card. The validator will hold the transaction until connectivity is reestablished, and then it initiates the payment processing. So, and the standards support that, that is allowed, and you still have a fully secure payment transaction process. The other thing that the new systems do is, as a transaction is processed, the credit card information is kept separate from the rest of your system. It's basically in a secure conduit. It's encrypted, and then any information that you need about the credit card transaction is linked to a token. So your fare payment solution does not store any credit card information. That is kept separate. So it provides an additional layer of security, but it still allows you the ability to look up specific bank card transactions. The the actual calculations of the fares are done post boarding. In other words, when you tap, the system doesn't need to calculate the fare right away. It can hold that transaction and hold a number of transactions throughout the day, and then calculate the fare based on fare policy. This allows payment aggregation at the end of the day. So what is being submitted to the payment processor is a single transaction at the end of the day. Again, this allows for lower costs because you're only going to be paying for one transaction rather than multiple transactions throughout the day. Now, this might seem that there's a risk to the agency that a tap will not be accepted or approved. Excuse me. However, again, the standards provide for a number of risk mitigation measures. So essentially what happens is the first time a card is used during the day, there is a message sent to the payment processor asking if the account is in good standing and whether payments can be accepted. If the account is good, a message comes back to the system, and in the form of a token, now that card can be used throughout the day because you know that it has been pre-approved. However, if the message comes back to the system saying, no, the account is not good, then that card or its token gets added to automatically added to a negative list, which is propagated to the validators throughout the system. And that way, the next time the customer taps their card, it will not be accepted. Now, one of the things that Visa provides is a $12 daily guarantee. So even that first tap, which might be worth $2 or $3, you are provided a guarantee by Visa that they will still pay that, even though the account was initially shown as not good. And the last payment risk mitigation measure that is allowed by the standards is automatic debt recovery. So what the systems can do is they can try several times over the next 2 weeks to resubmit that transaction. And what that does is it gives the opportunity for the customer, for example, they were in the process of making a payment to their account. They were, short term, they were short, and then they've added money to their account. So what sometimes happens is if you try and process the transaction again a few days later, now the account has enough money or its debt limit has been changed so that the transaction is processed. And that's another way that the agency will eventually receive the revenue for that transaction. There are two types of fare calculations that are currently typically used for open payments. One is called known fare, and this has been the one that's been around the longest. And this is where each tap results in a charge. And if your normal cash fare is, let's say, $2.50 every time the customer taps their contactless bank card or their mobile wallet, their account would be charged the $2.50. So it's basically a preset fare. Every single time it's charged the same. So what known fare does is, while it's simple and it doesn't need to implement complex fare calculations, it doesn't really allow you to provide any incentives to customers based on their travel frequency. So it's like the customer paying a cash fare every single time. Fare capping, which is really the more common way nowadays to implement open payments, as well as, there's moves by many agencies in North America to look at fare capping in their closed loop schemes, so their account-based systems. The taps are accumulated throughout the day. And at the end of the day, the system calculates the best fare that's available to the customer based on their travel frequency. So usually there's some sort of a daily cap that has been set, typically equivalent to what would formerly have been a day pass. And what happens is that once that limit is is hit, that's the maximum amount that the customer will be charged for that day. And then those same types of caps can be applied to a weekly or on a weekly or a monthly basis. So this is a just a chart that shows how fare capping actually works. What you will see is that at the top line, which we call the central system, you have, and this is where the single ride fare is $3. There's a 1 hour transfer period where you can switch to other buses and not pay additional fare, and a daily cap of $7.50. That's in the lower left-hand corner. So you will see on that first line that with the first tap at 6 a.m., the system basically tracks a $3 charge. So $3. When the customer transfers to another bus at 6:30, the next tap is recorded, but the calculation would be $0 because it's still within the transfer window. Then 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you have another $3 charge. Then in the evening, they travel one more time, but now that particular tap would be charged $1.50 because that puts the customer at the daily cap. So you will see when you get to the end of the day that $7.50 has been accumulated in terms of charges. But at the very bottom, where you see the acquire, you'll see that there's an end of the day settlement of $7.50. So what the customer will see on their bank statement is a charge of $7.50. Now, we'll talk about this later. Through a customer web portal, they can actually view each of their taps if they want the details of their journey. But on their bank statement, which reflects what was submitted to the acquirer for processing, it will only be a $7.50 charge. And you can see that rest of the examples, the next day, they do not hit the daily limit. So they're just charged for 2 rides at $6. And then the third day, there are additional journeys where they hit their limit earlier in the day, and then they have one more ride at the very end of the day where they've already hit the limit, so that ride would have no charge associated with it. So that's essentially how fare capping works. Similarly, you would have on your weekly cap and your monthly cap, it works much the same way. So what are some of the fare policy impacts, when you look at implementing open payments? Well, I want to reiterate that paying per tap is the same as paying cash fare. And if that is your agency's decision in terms of fare policy, there's not going to be very much incentive for people to switch to open payments because if they ride frequently enough to take advantage of any of the pass products that the agency is offering, that is what they will stay with. But if you implement fare capping that matches the pass products, then that provides incentive to people to move to open payments, because for those that can take advantage of it, it is more convenient than having to buy the monthly pass, set that up, and manage it. One of the things that, when you consider whether or not to implement open payments, is recognize that today, a large portion of your customers do have a mobile phone with Apple Pay or Google Pay. And understandably, there are the underbanked and unbanked customers who don't have a contactless bank card. And you still need to serve those customers to allow them to pay cash and to also somehow access the benefits that bank card holders do in terms of fare products and so on. But a large portion of your customers do have mobile phones or bank cards. And therefore, by introducing open payments, you will reduce the need to issue agency fare media, because for those people that already have the fare media in their hand, they're not going to need a specific agency card or pass to travel. They already have that. And our experience has been that to implement the new fare policy, customer communications are really important. Customers need to know and believe that they will always get the best fare available to them. That all they need to do is tap and go, and then the system will give them the best fare. If you look on the upper right corner, the tap, tap, cap, and contactless. This is our customer in Edinburgh, Scotland. This is kind of their theme that they've had when they implemented open payments in 2019. Everywhere they promote tap, tap, cap, tap, tap, cap. It's been a great marketing campaign for them. So a simple message that can be easily communicated to customers about the benefits of using their own fare media to ride, and that you now have an advanced system that calculates the best fares for them. Doing those things will ensure that the introduction of open payments is successful. So when implementing open payments, what are some of the things that you need to consider? Assuming that you already have a system, and it can be a magnetic stripe based fare media system, with a fare box. It can be a card-based system where you're writing data onto a card, or it can even be an account-based system, mobile ticketing, and so on. Whatever your current system is, to add open payments, you need to consider a few things. First of all, your readers have to be certified for bank card payments. And this means EMV certifications, specifically for, in Canada, your reader should be certified at least for Visa, MasterCard, and Interac. And also the reader needs to be certified for PCI PTS. Then what you have is another certification, which is for the actual end-to-end payment processing. So that's from the card reader to the payment gateway, the acquirer, that needs to be certified. And there are standards for Visa, MasterCard, and Interac. for open payments. So your supplier needs to be certified to those by those entities. And then your supplier also needs to be certified with the acquirer themselves, again, for open payments. So it's not just a matter of being able to process credit card transactions, let's say through a ticket vending machine or even a web portal. The certification has to be specific for open payments so that you can implement the open payment rules. So for example, FlowBird, we are certified with Moneris for open payments. And we currently support Visa and MasterCard, and Interac certification will be completed early summer of next year. Then the last piece that you need is that your actual fare payment system is able to support open payments, because you need a way to calculate the fares, and you also need tools to configure those fares. You also need some customer service tools, some sort of a CRM module, which will allow your customer service personnel to help customers if they were having problems with their transactions. They need to be able to look up the customer's transactions, see how, what they did during their journey, and to be able to assist them. And then you should provide also a customer web portal so that customers can look up their transactions themselves and their transaction history. So those are some of the things that go into an open payment solution, and kind of key components and key considerations. Now, there's a number of ways that you can implement open payments. So one is, if your current system is reaching end of its design life, or you're contemplating a new system, then if you're going to move to account-based ticketing, an account-based system with validators, or you have a mobile ticketing application that you're doing visual validation, and you want to move to electronic validation, that would be the time to look at a new system. But a new system should also support open payments concurrently. There are now a number of suppliers that can provide systems that support both open and closed loop transactions, QR codes, for mobile ticketing, whatever sales channels you decide to offer your customers. There are systems out there that offer that functionality. But what we're seeing in the North American marketplace is that the requirement to support open payments is becoming a pretty standard requirement. The other way to do it is to keep your existing system in place. Let's say it's not near the end of its design life, or it works just fine for you, and you want to offer open payments. It is possible to install, a separate validator just for open payment transactions. So you're basically implementing a parallel open payment solution to your existing one. This is what our customer in Laval is doing. So Laval is part of the Greater Montreal region. Therefore, they use the Opus fare payment system that is used in the region, similarly to Presto in the Greater Toronto region. Montreal has Opus. So what you see in the photograph is, to the left is the Opus smart card reader for the Opus regional scheme. And then separately beside it is one of our small form validators, which is for contactless credit card and mobile wallet payments. Sometimes this is a strategy that may be worth consideration. but it generally is a transition strategy. And then the last one is, integrating open payments into an existing system. Over the last few years, we have seen RFPs that require that the validators being supplied are so-called open payment ready. That's, there's different ways of interpreting that, but it may be possible that if you have current, relatively current validators, they are already certified from the hardware side to process bank card transactions. Then you would be looking really at a software solution. However, if they're not certified for bank card transaction, integrating open payments into your existing system may require a replacement or an upgrade to your existing validators. But certainly one of the things you would need to do is that the payment solution would require a certification with the acquirer, the end-to-end payment certification, because this is not really a common approach. It's being done with some very large systems where the cost of certification is manageable, but we have not seen this type of a requirement for small and mid-sized agencies where the cost of essentially a custom solution and its associated support costs simply isn't warranted. But it is an option that can be considered. So that is really my presentation about open payments and how it could possibly be implemented. So I'm open to any questions or comments from the participants.
Thomas, we do have a question in the chat. A question, maybe you can elaborate more on the way that open payment systems can accommodate discounted fare rates, such as for seniors or students, U-passes, those kinds of things.
Yes, that's an excellent question. So earlier on, I mentioned that one of the features of modern open payment solutions is the tokenization of a card. So essentially, a person can register their credit card on the system, and it's stored in the system as a token. And that so essentially they have an account. And what the agency can do is they can, at least with our system, they can assign a profile to that account. As a senior or a youth, or I mean, you could potentially also let customers self-assign profiles to them. That depends on your policy, proof of eligibility and so on. But if you do the verification once and assign that profile to that account, it eliminates the need, potentially for the customer to show an ID each time they tap and so on and so forth. But discount fares are certainly supported, because once you can actually set up different fare pricing depending on the profile. So it could be youth, it could be seniors, paratransit customers. So paratransit customers, when they ride paratransit, there would be specific pricing for paratransit, but they could potentially also have the rights to ride for free on fixed route. That's another, flexibility in the system.
Thank you. Thomas, one of the questions that Opta often receives from some of our smaller systems, and in particular, those municipalities that now have community transportation routes, there's been a real push in Ontario for replacement intercommunity and intercity services, and a lot of them have very low ridership, but are certainly working towards increasing that ridership. So people, a lot of folks taking those services are unfamiliar with transit and might very well prefer this kind of a solution. Is there a size at which you need to be in order for an open payment solution to make sense? Like, how small can you be in practical terms and look at open payment?
So the limiting factor in terms of size is not the technology, because typically these solutions are now provided as software as a service. So whether it's a fleet of 5 buses or 50 buses doesn't really matter all that much. But as you get to very small agencies, the cost of actually implementing the system, and I mean people time, so everything from a project manager to meetings with the agency to discuss how the system's supposed to work, and the time to configure the fare policy. So that one-time cost is difficult to spread over a very small number of buses. So I personally have always found that to be a challenge, because the amount of work that's required for a small agency, let's say just from coordination and project management, is the same, whether it's 50 or 55 or 20 buses. And, and I'm open to suggestion of how that can be done more efficiently, because once the system is up and running, then it doesn't matter. It's paid for on an as-you-go basis through transaction fees. So
as a follow-up question in the chat here from Grand River Transit, there's a question about whether this can accommodate discounts that may occur based on cross-boundary travel. So again, these community transportation routes tend to bring people in more rural areas into larger centers like a Waterloo, a London, a Kingston. So the questions about those the cross-boundary travel and dealing with more than one agency as part of a single trip, where you may pay a smaller fare portion to each agency.
Right. So that does create complexity, because now you're trying to get the solution to apply different fares for different services. So you could have an interurban route that just comes to an urban route, different fare structures. It certainly is possible. We have not done it. I mean, we deal with very complex fare schemes, especially in the United Kingdom, which are ridiculous and that have a lot of this interurban interfaces. But the whole point of open payments is simplicity. So the way that one of the advantages of open payments is that you're using the same fare media to ride throughout. But what you can have is, depending on the service, you can have a fare cap, different fare caps assigned to different services. And ultimately, if a customer is riding from a small village into a larger city, they tap their card, they're charged whatever is the charge on that particular system. And then they move on to the city service and they continue tapping. And that city service can charge whatever is the normal fares. And, for years, we've talked about the ability to use fare media between different agencies. Well, we don't have to reinvent that. It exists already, and it's called, credit card, debit card, that allows you to do that. All that the customer would have is charges from 2 agencies on their credit card statement.
Thank you. Any other questions? Feel free to unmute. If it's a long and involved question and hard to put in the chat, happy to have you join us here, join the video, unmute. We've got time for a couple more questions. Thomas, I see in your presentation here, you have your contact information. Following the webinar, we post all of the recordings to the Opta website, and we provide the presentations. So if you are thinking of questions later on, you can go to the presentation, find the contact information for Thomas and FlowBird there, and you can share the recording with others in your organization. We encourage folks to use these as lunch and learns. They're there for on demand, and all registered participants will receive an email with that contact information. So last call for any questions in the chat. Thomas, any closing remarks?
No, just, well, thank you everyone for joining. I hope you've found the information we provided useful. You know, as people come back to public transit, I think it's important for agencies to make it as easy for people to travel as possible. You know, people travel patterns are going to be changing. So the traditional fare products like weekly and monthly passes may not be appropriate anymore for some of your riders. And this is where fare capping comes into play, that, you know, a person doesn't need to decide what fare product they need because their travel patterns will change. Open payment is just one way to pay. We believe that agencies should provide as many fare sales channels as possible to their customers to make their travel easier and more convenient. So we'd be happy to help both as a resource and of course, you know, we do also compete in the marketplace for new systems. So hopefully we'll be in touch with some of you that have joined today and at some point in the future.
Wonderful, thank you. And I'll remind everyone to please put in your calendars April 24th to 27th of 2022. Fingers crossed, we will be together in person for the Ontario Transportation Expo. It has both a conference portion with business sessions where we will almost certainly have a session on fare payment options, more than likely in the context, as Thomas says, of encouraging people to return to transit and innovative ways of doing that, as well as the trade show on Tuesday the 26th. So thank you again to all of our Opta Live webinar sponsors, and in particular today to FlowBird and to Thomas Oliva for your time. Thank you everyone, and we'll talk again. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.